Good morning, everyone. Welcome to economics class. Today we'll be continuing with the topic population. Last week we looked at the beginning of the topic population, where we saw the meaning of population, population census, and all the other problems that are facing population in the country and in West African countries in particular. So today we are going to continue with the topic and look at the other subtopics under it. We'll begin with the population density. When we look at population density, we are just trying to look at the total number of people that are within a particular area, calculating it with the formula given here, where we have population density is calculated by dividing the total population by the land area. So if we are given a total population, that's the number of people living in a country, and we are given the land area per square kilometers. If we're asked to find the density, we are just looking at how dense the population of that area is. That's how many people are living in a particular area per square kilometer. So that is what population density is all about. We are calculating the density, or how dense a population is in a particular region or in a particular country. Now below this slide, we can see an example given where we are given total population to be 88 million, the total land area to be 900,000, and we are asked to calculate the population density. To find the population density of that area or of that region, we'll divide the total population by the total land area. That's 88 million divided by 900,000. This will give us approximately 98 persons per square kilometer. That's per square kilometer, you have 98 number of persons residing or being found in that area. Now the next slide is the map of Nigeria that shows the population density of different states in the country. Now on this map, you can see, following the key that is provided, you can see all the states that have low population density and the states that have very high population density. We have states like Kano that has over 300 persons per square kilometer, and we have other states that have less density, like Niger, Nasarawa, Taraba, and other states around here, where you have a low population density of below 70 persons per square kilometer. Now, the next slide, we are going to look at the aging or declining population. When we talk about aging population, we are looking at the number of old people in a particular country. So when we have an aging or a declining population, it simply means that that country has a higher number of old people than that of the young people or the youth. So there are some factors that are responsible for this. When we have an aging population, or we have a country that has a high percentage of old people, these are some of the factors that can contribute to that, or that can lead to that. The first factor is decrease in birth rate. When we have reduction in the birth rate, that's the rate at which children are being given birth to, it will make the number of old people to be more than that of the younger people. So we have an aging or a declining population. Another factor that can cause this is increase in death rate of young people. When we have young people dying earlier, it will result to having a higher number of old people in that country than the young people. The third factor is emigration. Remember, in the last class, we discussed the determinants of a population, where we have birth rate, death rate, and migration. And under migration, we divided it into two: immigration and emigration. Now, emigration simply means the total number of people that are leaving a country to another country, or leaving a particular geographical area to another area. So this is another factor that can contribute to having a declining population, where we have so many young people leaving their country for greener pastures. So we end up having older people in that country, because the younger ones have all departed that country to other countries or to other regions. The fourth factor that can contribute to an aging population is war. When we have a war in a country, or when a country is engaged in war with another country, they will end up sending the youth or the younger population to help in fighting such war, and that will end up affecting the population of that country, leading to the country having a higher population of the older people than the younger people, because we know the outcome of war. There will always be deaths and other forms of casualty, and this will end up affecting the younger population who are sent out to engage in such war. The final factor we'll be looking at as the reason for having a declining population is disease. When we have an outbreak of disease or an epidemic, it will end up affecting the population of that country. Now, if that disease is a disease that affects the younger population, it will end up leading to having a reduction in the number of young people in that country, and an increase in the number of old people in that country. The next slide is going to look at the three major types of population. There are three main types of population: overpopulation, underpopulation, and optimum population rather. These are the three main types of population: overpopulation, underpopulation, and optimum population. Now we're going to look at them one after the other. This slide is focusing on overpopulation. When we talk about overpopulation, we are simply explaining the fact that there are so many people living in the country in relation to the resources available in that country. When a country is seen as being overpopulated, it simply means that there are so many people living in that country, and the resources available in that country is not enough to take care of such number of people. So we say the country is overpopulated, or you have overpopulation. Now, a country that is overpopulated, we have a reduction or a fall in the standard of living of the people, because the resources are not enough to cater for the needs of all the people living in that country. So the standard of living of the people there will end up reducing or falling. Now, how do we control overpopulation? The following are some of the ways that can be used to control overpopulation. The first one is family planning. Family planning simply means a system put in place to reduce the number of children that a family is to give birth to. So when we have a family planning in the country, and each family is advised not to give birth to more than two children, you end up reducing the population of that country. So this is one of the way. Family planning is one of the way in which we can reduce overpopulation of a country. Another factor, or another way that can be used to reduce or control the overpopulation of a country is discouraging of early marriage. We discussed in the last class that early marriage is one of the factors that can result in having a large population, because when young people are encouraged to marry early, they start giving birth early, and it ends up increasing the population size of that country. So to reduce the population of a country, we have to look for a way to discourage early marriage. That's we don't encourage the young ones to marry early. We end up advising them to stay longer into their 30s before they get married, so that they will not have to give birth to so many children. The third way that we can use in controlling overpopulation is increase in food supply. When we know that overpopulation happens when we have so many people and the resources are not enough to cater for the needs of such people. So when we can increase the food supply, it will end up we'll be able to meet the needs of the basic needs of the people in that country. So that will go a long way to solve the problem of overpopulation. The fourth way is encouraging monogamy. We discussed also in the previous class that polygamy, that's having a man marrying more than one wife, encourages a large population, or it can lead to having a large population in a country. So how do we solve this? How do we make sure that we do not have a large population that can lead to overpopulation? By encouraging monogamy. That's instead of having polygamy, now we now have monogamy, where we have a man and a wife, one man marrying just one wife, not rather than having polygamy where we have a man marrying more than one wife. So if we encourage monogamy, it will result in having a less or a lower population, so that we'll be able to solve the problem of overpopulation. The last way we can use to control overpopulation is discouraging immigration. Immigration simply means the movement of people into a country. So when we discourage immigration, we end up reducing the number of people that end up coming into that country, and it will help to reduce the population size of that country. Now let's look at the second type of population, which is the underpopulation. Remember, in the previous slide, we say overpopulation is a situation where we have so many people that are living in a country and the resources available are not enough to cater for the needs of such people. Now, on the other hand, underpopulation simply means you have a fewer number of people that are not making use of the available resources. That is, the resources are there, but the number of people living in that area or in that region is not enough compared to the resources available. So we have underpopulation. Now, what are the causes of underpopulation? The first factor that can cause underpopulation is decrease in birth rate. When we have fewer number of people being given birth to in the country, it will lead to underpopulation, which means the resources are there, but the manpower or the humans that are supposed to harness such resources are not there to make use of such resources. So we have underpopulation. The second factor that can cause underpopulation is increase in death rate. When there's an increase in death rate, it will end up reducing the number of people that are residing or that are living in that country. That leads to underpopulation. The third factor is high level of emigration. When so many people keep leaving the country, probably for greener pasture or better opportunities, it will end up leading to underpopulation of that region or of that country. We now move on to look at the advantages of underpopulation. What are those benefits that we can get from having a country, or the benefit of not having so high or of not having a high population? The first advantage is there will be abundant resources. Remember that underpopulation simply means you have so much resources available but fewer number of people. So one of the advantages of having an underpopulation, or one of the advantages of underpopulation, is that you have abundant resources in that country. So we will not really have a problem of having a low standard of living of the people living in that country. Another advantage is there will be availability of employment. So the people living in that country will have employment opportunities, or they will have places that they'll be able to work in if they are willing and able or ready to work. So there's always employment opportunity in an underpopulated economy or underpopulated country. The third advantage is that there will be low pressure on social amenities. That those social amenities that are available will not, there won't be so much competition and end up exhausting the whole available resources in the country. So there's a low pressure on social amenities, but people are not so many in that region. Finally, the fourth advantage to underpopulation is low level of congestion. We have fewer number of people, so you will not really have the problem of congestion in that region or in that country. Now, moving on to the next slide, let's look at the disadvantages. We've seen the advantages of underpopulation. So what are the disadvantages of underpopulation? The first disadvantage is that it leads to inadequate labor force. We have so much resources that should be harnessed, but fewer number of people to harness such resources. So it leads to inadequate labor force. Underpopulation leads to inadequate labor force. Another disadvantage is that there will be low level of production. Still in line with the explanation of the first point, we have resources available, but people are not there to make use of it. So we have a low level of production. The third disadvantage is underutilization of resources, which they are all in line with the previous points stated. Underpopulation will have a fewer number of people, so those people will reduce the labor force, or rather the fact that there are fewer people means there's going to be a less labor force, there will be low level of production, underutilization of resources, and there will be low level of export, because if people are not there to produce goods and services in the country, therefore those goods will be so few that will not be enough for export, for the country to export to other countries. Another disadvantage is that the size of the market will be small. Definitely when you have few labor force, underutilization of resources, the market will be small because the number of people are not enough to produce whatever needs to be produced in that country. Finally, there will also be low level of savings and investment in an underpopulated country. Now let's look at the third type of population, which is the optimum population. We have seen the overpopulation and underpopulation. Overpopulation being that we have so many number of people and few resources. Underpopulation being that you have few number of people and adequate resources in that, or adequate resources in that country. Now the optimum population is like in between the two. If we look at the graph here on this slide, we can see that we have underpopulation by the left hand side, overpopulation by the right hand side, and optimum population in the middle, where you have the number of people in that country is adequate enough to use the available resources and the level of technology. So we have optimum population. It's the proper or the adequate number of people required for the level of resources or level of technology and available resources in that country. So we have underpopulation, overpopulation, and optimum population, which are the three main types of population. Now let's look at the population theories. The first population theory we are going to be looking at is the Malthusian population theory. This theory was introduced by an economist called Reverend Thomas Robert Malthus. This economist introduced some steps to explain the relationship between the population of a country and the means of subsistence. So he explained that with the rate that every economy is going, it will get to a stage where we have a high level of population compared to the available resources needed to take care of such a population, which can result in a low standard of living of that country. Now he introduced three different steps that can result in this. He said the first explanation he gave was that the population of each economy or each country grows in a geometric progression. That you have a higher rate of increase in population compared to the increase in the means of sustenance. So we have population growing at a geometric rate, while the food production is increasing at an arithmetic progression. So he believes that the rate of increase in the population is way more than the food production that is being carried out to meet the needs of such a population. He also said that because of the increase in the population compared to the available resources, there will always be a tendency of the economy to grow beyond the available food, thereby leading to a low standard of living of the people living in that country. Then he introduced two different checks that can be put in place to check this high level of population growth compared to the available resources. He said we can have the natural check and the other positive or rather negative check, where we have the first check where will be the occurrence of war, famine, and diseases. We know that when there is war and famine and diseases, it will end up reducing the population of a country, which will help to reduce the rate at which the population is growing compared to the available resources. Then he also introduced another check, which is called the negative check, where we have human beings themselves trying to limit the rate of increase in the population. The first one is using the moral restraints, and we have encouraging late marriage and celibacy. So this simply means that for us to be able to check the rate of increase in population compared to the increase in food production, we have to by ourselves restrain ourselves to abstain from anything that will end up resulting in a high level of population, encourage young people not to marry early so that they will not end up giving birth to so many children that can result in a high population, and also encourage the youth or people in the country to live a celibate life. That's a life of celibacy where they end up abstaining completely from sex. This will result in a reduction in the population of that country, and encouraging, or rather allowing the food production to be able to be in line with the increase in the population of that country. Now, the next slide is a graphical representation of this theory, of the Malthusian population theory. Now, from what we explained in the previous slide, we can see it simplified on this chart, where we have the proposition that he made that population is growing geometrically, where we can see it here, and we have the food production increasing arithmetically. This will result in a disequilibrium. That's, there won't be a balance. The rate of increase in population and food production will not be equal. So there's a disequilibrium between the population size and the food supply. And he stated the ways to correct this disequilibrium. The first one is a natural check, which was explained in the previous slide. Here we have the occurrence of earthquakes, epidemics, war, famines, and flood. These are natural checks that occur naturally that will help to checkmate or to reduce the increase in population size, and the other preventive measures where we have encouraging late marriage, celibacy, self-restraint, and family planning to help to reduce the increase in population size. Now let's look at the events that proved the Malthusian theory wrong. Those things that happened that end up proving the theory of Thomas Malthus to be wrong. The first one is the development of technical knowledge and mechanization. We have some countries, most especially the developed countries, improving their technical knowledge and engaging in mechanized system of agriculture. So this has helped to improve the rate of food production. So this is one of the events that has helped to prove this theory to be wrong, because we have some developed countries that are able to work or rather to improve their food production in line with the increase in population size. Another event that helped to prove this theory wrong is the efficiency in the transportation system. This also occurs in most of the developed countries where they have improved means of transportation. So the food production is being moved from the production site to the average citizen of that country. So this has helped to make sure that the food or resources are provided for the population of that country. The third event that has proved this theory to be wrong is improvement in our medical system. This also is applicable to the developed countries. We have so many developed countries having better medical system that help to take care of the sick and the old and every other medical issues that might arise, which has helped to balance the difference between the population size and food production. The fourth event is the interdependence of nations. We have so many countries depending on each other, helping each other to grow and assist each other in areas that they are in need. So this has helped to reduce the disadvantages or the shortcomings that the large population size has on food production. Then finally, we have changes in social attitudes like family planning and birth control. So many countries, most especially the developed countries, have been able to put so many things in place that helps to checkmate or reduce the rate of population growth in that country. Things like family planning and ways of having birth control. So all these events that happened or that occurred has proved the Malthusian theory to be wrong. Now let's look at the events that has proved him right. The first event is a high population and low food production in developing countries, having Nigeria among the developing countries. We have so many West African countries that are classified under developing countries, still having a high population and low food production. So most of these developing countries, what is happening in all these developing countries has helped to prove Thomas Malthus' right and his theory to actually be right. The second event that has happened to prove him right is the difficulty in eradicating poverty. We have so many developing countries still having their citizens living in abject poverty. So they are still unable to cater for the needs of the average citizen of that country because they have a high population compared to the food production. The third event is the low standard of living in many developing nations. This also has helped to prove him right. Then we also have poor economic development in most developing countries, which has also helped to prove this theory to be right, that the increase in population size being higher than increase in food production will reduce the standard of living of the people living in that country. Now, the final event that has proved Thomas Malthus to be right is a negative attitude like polygamy. We have so many people living in developing countries still practicing polygamy. Now we know that when a country is practicing polygamy, that is having a system of marriage where a man is allowed to marry more than one wife. It will help to increase the level of population of that country. So we have developing countries that are not really working on their food production, but they still encourage polygamy. It will help, or rather it will go a long way to prove what Thomas Malthus said to be right. Now let's look at the second theory. We've seen the Malthusian theory. Now let's look at the demographic transition theory. The demographic transition theory is another theory that was put in place to show the different stages that a country will undergo in its population growth. That we have a country that is just starting up, having a high population at the initial stage. Then in the middle stages, it has helped to regulate the population size, and the third stage where it has already stabilized, you now have a proper or the right population growth in that country. Now let's look at this using the graph that is presented below. We have the demographic transition model. Now, in your textbook, the textbook explains three main stages of population growth in developing countries. Three main stages. But this chart that is going to be explained is going to divide it into 4 stages. So don't mix it up. This chart divides into 4 stages for better understanding. Now let's explain what this chart says. Now, with the first stage, we have under this chart, we can see the y-axis where we have the births and deaths per thousand per year. That's in a year we have the total number of births and the total number of deaths. Now on the x-axis, now we have the different stages, which has divided into 4 different stages. Now stage 1, let's look at the first stage where we have the high stationary. Under this stage, if we look at all the various curves on this chart, or rather on this graph, we can see that the orange line signifies the population growth. The green line signifies death rate, while the purple line signifies birth rate. Now on the first stage, we can see high birth rate, high death rate, and low population. This is the stage where, this is the stage where the economy is just starting up. Now it will now transit or move to the next stage, which is the second stage, where we have early expanding. Under the second stage, we will now have the birth rate decreasing. There's a reduction in the death rate rather. The death rate reducing, and we have birth rate still being high and the population increasing. So on this stage, the economy, or rather the country, is already putting things in place, encouraging medical. They are trying to put a better medical system in place to reduce the death rate. So we have a reduction in death rate under the second stage, but the birth rate is still high and the population is still increasing. Now the third stage, under this demographic transition model, we have the third stage where we have late expanding. Under this stage, we have reduction in death rate, where we have 10 deaths per 1,000 people in a year. So we have reduction in death rate. Then the birth rate is already reducing, and we still have a population still growing high. Then the fourth stage is where the country has been able to stabilize the population growth rate. So on this fourth stage, you can see that there's a fall in the birth rate and there's a fall in the death rate. So the economy in the fourth stage has been able to regulate the population growth. So basically, this theory, the demographic transition theory, just explains that there are stages in the population growth of developing countries. So each developing countries undergoes 3 main stages. So there are 3 main stages that an economy or a developing country will undergo under its population growth. The first stage, where it's just starting up, it will have a high level of death rate and birth rate. The middle or the second stage, where it will have high birth rate, low death rate, while the third stage, where it will have low death rate and low birth rate. Now let's look at population distribution, the population distribution in every country. Now, the distribution of the population of a country is categorized into different categories. The first one, we can classify it under age distribution. Under this age distribution, it's breaking down a population into different age groups. So we have dividing them into different categories using their age. So we have people from the ages of 0 to 17 years classified under the dependent population. Then we also have ages from 18 to 60. People between the ages of 18 years to 60 years being classified under the working population or the labor force. Then we have from 60 years and above, 60, 70, 80 and above, people within that age range being classified as a dependent population. Now, if a country is classifying its population distribution using the age distribution, it will have the dependent population, that's the younger ones, people between the ages of 0 to 7 who are dependent on their parents and dependent on one person or the other. And we have people from 60 years and above who are the old people in the country, still classified as a dependent population, because the old people are dependent on their children and some of them are dependent on the government. Then we have the middle one, which is people between the ages of 18 to 60, which is a working population or the labor force. Now let's look at another category of population distribution, which is the sex distribution. Under this category, we have the population of a country being categorized under male and female. So the gender is used to categorize the population distribution of that country. So they classify them either male or female. Then we have the third category, which is occupational distribution. That's, they categorize them based on the different work that they do. There's a working population. Now remember that the working population is between the ages of 18 to 60, depending on the country. So if the classification is under occupation, then they will be graded or categorized based on the work they do or the kind of work they engage in. And finally is a geographical distribution. This category now, this level categorizes the population based on the geographical areas, the geographical region. So different areas in the country will have different categories. Now, under population, there are a mathematical approach to some of or how to calculate some of the aspects of the topic. Like what the first one we looked at, where we saw the population density, where we can calculate population density by dividing the total population by the land area. Then we can also calculate the population growth rate. To calculate our population growth rate, we'll have to um, subtract the death rate from birth rate, then add the net migration. Net migration simply means the difference between immigration and emigration. So you subtract the number of people living in the country from the number of people coming to the country, and you get the net migration. So when you get to the net migration and you are asked to find the population growth rate, that's what is the rate at which the population grows. You have to get figures for the birth rate, figures for the death rate, and figures for the net migration. So to get this now, you subtract the number of death rate from birth rate, then you add the net migration to get the population growth rate. Now, if you're asked to calculate the natural increase, that's not including the level of migration. So if you are calculating the natural increase, you just subtract the number of deaths from the number of births, and you get the natural increase. Also, you can be asked to calculate the percentage increase. Now, to calculate percentage increase, you find the difference between the new population and the old population divided by the old population times 100 over 1. You will get the percentage increase. Then you can also be asked to find the dependency ratio. Remember, when we were discussing the population distribution under age distribution, we had the dependent population and the working population. The dependent population being the younger children from the ages of 0 to 17, and the older people from the ages of 60 and above. Those are the dependent population. Then we have the working population, or the labor force. That's the youth, or the people between the ages of 18 to 60 who are still working. So when you are asked to calculate the dependency ratio, you divide the two. That's, you get the figure for people from the ages of 0 to 17, people from the ages of 60 and above. Those are the dependent populations. So when you add up that, you divide it by the number of the working population to get the dependency ratio. So you can also check through your textbooks to see other examples, worked examples that will further explain this. This slide, the final slide, is the assignment for the week. So I encourage you to attempt it and also go through your textbooks to get other questions that you can work on, or even the WAEC pack questions on population that you can solve to familiarize yourself with how questions are being asked under this topic. I also encourage you to subscribe to this channel for more videos, and for any inquiries, please contact the school management on the link provided below. Thank you.